Hey, podcast family, this is Albert Tate. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are having a ball. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I hope you're talking about it. I hope you're telling your friends about it. I hope you are having a good time. Listen, today in this series, this season is all about moments that shaped us. This season, this episode, it's for those that may be discouraged a little bit. You may be looking outside and saying, man, my world is darker now than it ever has been before. And you may be needing a little hope. Well, today, hope is going to shape you. We got the hope dealer in the house. Her name is Danielle Strickland. She is a global ambassador for the kingdom of God. I don't know any other way to describe her. She's an amazing communicator, an amazing advocate for those who are under-resourced and underprivileged. She's traveled all across the globe, but today she is here with me, and we have an amazing, inspiring conversation. If you need a little hope, grab a cup of coffee, grab some chips. If you're like me, you want the Ruffles with the sour cream cheddar, grab that. I don't know if it goes with coffee well, but whatever. Grab your stuff, sit down, and prepare to be inspired and encouraged by my friend, Danielle Strickland.
Stadia has had the honor of helping hundreds of great leaders start new churches. We have a passionate desire to make sure that every child on the planet can experience the overwhelming love of Jesus Christ through the local church. This vision compels us to ask one very important question. Who's next? Who are the leaders that God is raising up to plant new churches? Who are the leaders that will answer the call to say, I'll follow, I'll raise up this generation, the next generation to know Jesus Christ and to change the world forever? Are you ready to start your church planting journey? Perhaps you know someone who is. Stadia is ready to help, and we'll be with you every step of the way, because we won't stop until every child has a church.
Danielle Strickland is here after a great flight of drinking in first class.
Not true, none of it.
Unlimited.
No drinking and no first class.
You don't fly first class?
I do not. I don't.
Why don't you fly first class?
Because I'm just one of many people in a sea of people. That's it.
In coach?
I fly in coach, yeah.
Intentionally, obviously. Because you ought to have enough miles to upgrade.
Yeah, I've got mile issues because
upgrade
I moved to America, so I started fresh with Delta, and then so I get upgraded a lot more with Delta, and then I just moved back to Canada, so I'm like starting again with my Air Canada points. But
so when you were with Delta, would you take the upgrade to first class?
I would take it on some flights.
Is this a moral issue?
No.
It's just kind of whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
The first time I ever, I spent 22 and a half years as an officer in the Salvation Army.
Okay.
And, you don't make any money. That's part of the deal.
Right.
So I'm just used to there's this famous Salvation Army pioneer officer named George Scott Railton. Mm-hmm. And he's the guy that took the Salvation Army to everywhere. He just was like a global machine of evangelism and aggressive sort of Salvation Army-ness.
Yeah.
And he used to always travel third class in the train system, even in India, everywhere, third class. And someone once said to him, why do you travel third class? And he said, because there's no fourth.
Nice.
So,
nice. But you will take an upgrade to
yeah,
first
of course
class.
I will. My first time on a first class upgrade, I was served the appetizer, right?
Uh-huh.
And I was coming back from I'd spent a year in Russia or something, some crazy, and so I was hungry. And I remember I'm in first class, I'm just this is not happening, I'm in Disneyland, and they bring the appetizer plate, and I remember going, oh no, I forgot how rich people eat, right? It's all smoked salmon, tiny little.
Yeah.
So I was I'm so hungry, so I just ate all of it anyway, the whole plate, and then I ate the bun basket, because I'm I gotta eat, and then the lady comes and she goes, oh, you're done the appetizer, and then she brought out a real meal, which I didn't realize was coming.
Oh, you thought that was the real meal.
I thought that was it.
He's these rich people, come on.
They don't know how to eat.
A sister is hungry.
That's right. So.
Danielle Strickland, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Thanks for taking some time.
Yeah, it's a joy.
At Exponential, what are you excited about? What excites you most to communicate to church planners, people that are here dreaming about planning a church, that people that are watching, thinking and discerning about praying and going and living their life on mission? what's the message that you are excited to always speak to them?
Well, I am personally, especially at this season of my life, I am so hopeful right now about the church and the world. Like I feel like we're at this threshold of opportunity like we haven't seen before. And I think what it looks like chaos. It looks like global chaos and even national chaos in the American scene. But what I see is opportunity everywhere. And so I'm really excited about that. I think the church's finest hour is coming right up.
Now, tell me, how are you translating that to opportunity?
Well, first of all, I think the
see?
principles are clear in that, in the creation of all things in Genesis, where there's chaos.
Yeah.
And the Spirit of God is hovering over the chaos. And like sort of the image in the Hebrew story is like a mother bird who like begins to give birth. And what she gives birth to out of the chaos is light and sky and expanse and foundations and multiplication and all these things. So I really feel like the more chaos there is in the world, the more we should be looking for what God is hovering and waiting to birth in the world. So I kind of I'm like addicted to like chaotic places being opportunity, just in theology,
Yeah.
But also I just feel like I was in Lebanon and the Jordan last year trying to understand some of the Syrian refugee crisis, and I was with this worker from World Relief. And she had just talked to her mother on the phone, and her parents. She was in Jordan, and they're seeing like so many Muslim families, Syrian refugee families, come to faith. I mean, like sovereignly, even just in dreams and visions of Muslims coming into understanding who Jesus is.
Yeah.
And it's really exciting. And she's talking to her mom. She's American, and her mom's saying like, "We're hearing the news. This is getting way too dangerous. It's time to come back home. Like we love your justice flair, but it's time to come back home. It's not safe there." And this girl said, "I told my mom," she said, "you made me pray my whole life. You had a picture on the wall of the 1040 window. And you prayed for your whole generation, make a way. God, make a way for the unreached people groups of the world to hear the gospel. Wow. And now he's made a way, and you want me to come home."
Wow.
And I remember standing there listening to this chick going, wow. And all of a sudden it flipped from greatest refugee crisis to greatest opportunity for the gospel. And I'm talking to another friend of mine in Canada, and she got a vision from God. She's really missional. She spent years planting churches in other countries, and now she's sort of at a church that sends people out, so she's kind of like multiplying her influence. And she said, I was asking the Lord, like, is this really what I'm supposed to do? Just stay at this like kind of suburban church and send other people? Because I'm built for this. And please send me somewhere, And God says, I want you to go nowhere. So she's like, literally said to her, nowhere. That's what she's like, okay, fine, I'll stay. Like nowhere must mean nowhere, so I'll just stay and I'll try to live contented and like just do what I'm told. And then that night she's watching the news. And there's a reporter at the largest refugee camp in Kenya, and he's outside the refugee camp, and he's saying on the news, she's watching the news, and he says, I'm at this camp, names it, and then says, this is loosely translated nowhere. And my friend says, wow. Oh, nowhere, like is a place.
Wow.
So she goes to nowhere, and she starts to understand, and she starts to take a look at this refugee crisis in the world. And then she hears this speech by the UN Secretary General, and he says, all we're mandated to do at the UN is to keep people alive, but we can't actually give them life. So we need faith communities to help us.
Oh, wow.
So she's like, okay, I've just been invited by the UN Secretary General, as has the entire church, to go to places where people are on hold with their life for 20 to 25 years, average lifespan of a refugee camp, where the church is happening. There's already indigenous churches there, so we don't need to go necessarily start them. We just need to resource the church to reach the people, because in 20 years, they're going back to the places that were once closed to the gospel. So she tells a story, and I'm just like, what? Like, we are literally, like, I feel like, when I talk about it, I get all unglued because I get so excited about the possibilities that are happening right now.
What's the thing that you're most excited to leverage in this next season of your life of ministry?
For me, it's this thing, Brave Global. So I Noemi Chavez is here. She's one of the MCs at this event.
Yeah.
So Noemi and I co-founded this campaign called the Brave Global Campaign.
No way.
So I've been 22 years, I've been trying to combat human trafficking. I've been chaplain in brothels, I've been dragging women off the street, I've been trying to spread awareness and break up, pimping strategies. I've been doing all kinds of things, 22 and a half years. And I was in the back of a massage parlor, this brothel with this madame, and who owns and operates about 3 of these things, all dodgy, Anyway, she's showing me around the place. We struck up a really unique friendship. She's showing me around the place. I say to her, you are one of the strongest, obviously business savvy, most intelligent, beautiful women I've ever met. Why do you do this with your life? So she takes me into the back, which I know something's wrong because she doesn't want anyone to see us. And she shuts the door and she says, let me tell you, when I was 11 years old, I ran away from my father who was raping me. I walked up the street, a guy pulled over in a truck, said, if you get in, I'll give you a safe place to stay for sex. She said, I turned my first trick. That night I cried the whole night long. She said, the second night I cried the whole night long. The third night I cried the whole night. She said, finally, after weeks of crying, I stopped crying and I tried to make the best with what I was dealt. And she looked at me, I'll never forget, strongest woman I know, tears streaming down her face, and she says to me, where were you when I was 11? And what happened was that question was really interesting because I've been hearing those stories my whole entire life, and all of those stories are the same. They're all the same. And the question, the Holy Spirit just kept repeating in my mind, where were you when she was 11? Where were you when she was 11? Where were you when she was 11? Then I moved to Long Beach and I came into contact with Noemi Chavez. We were talking about this because they were having the same conversation at their local church in Long Beach. And she said, we got to reach the girls. We got to get to the girls with their 11. And we came across a study done nationally in America that 70 to 80% of domestic sex trafficking victims come from foster care. 70 to 80%.
Wow.
So then this goes back to greatest problem is the greatest opportunity for the kingdom, because we realized it was this stunning moment of basic revelation where we went, if traffickers can target girls for exploitation, why can't the church target girls for redemption? It's not rocket science. We know their names. It's not like we're struggling against this mystery, this invisible forces that are these. We know who they are. We know 80% of their names, So we decided to start this campaign. So Noemi modeled it locally in Long Beach out of her church. And it targets vulnerable girls for trafficking. And it sees them, first of all, the church reaches out, creates partnerships with the city. Second of all, it says, we believe in you. So I talked to 1,200 marginalized, possibly vulnerable, exploited girls and said to them, you're not the problem. You're the solution to the problem. You hold all the power, actually. We just forgot to talk to you about it. You know what I mean? We forgot to tell you, but we actually believe that God sees the sacredness in you, made you just how you are. Use your opportunities, even though they're hard, for the benefit of other girls. It's just amazing. And then third is a partnership.
Wow.
So I'm crazy because for the first time in 22 and a half years of fighting trafficking, which I think is the largest, fastest growing crime against humanity on the planet. And I feel like our generation, this will define us, I think. History will look back and go, who did anything about that? And anyway, I feel like the church is supposed to do it. That's what the church is supposed to do.
Yeah.
The church is of a community of people with a kingdom divine mandate that says this impossible thing that the world literally says is impossible is possible because we know God. And God has this redemptive purpose, so I'm really excited about that.
Wow.
Yeah. Brave Global.
I'm excited about it now.
Right.
Brave Global.
Brave Global.
How do people get involved?
braveglobal.org, I hope.
Noemi's
or it might be .com. I'm that's my worst part.
Noemi is a great friend of mine.
Good.
So I have to ask her about her
Oh,
and Josh.
she's going to come unglued too because we're
just-
both,
Oh, wow.
they're amazing.
Yeah. That is amazing.
I know.
When was the last time you found yourself walking in one of these places and you were actually afraid?
Afraid?
Yeah.
Yeah, fear is something that happens to me in hindsight. It's a weird thing. I'm not inclined to be afraid. I kind of get excited at adventure, so
Because
I'm
a lot
not.
of people have got to ask you that because the places that you're going,
Yeah.
the things that you're doing, because most people that will feel the tug to do something risky,
Yeah.
fear grips them first.
Right.
So how are you navigating not allowing fear to stop you from being faithful to what God's calling you to do. That's what I'm after.
Yeah, you know, that Elizabeth Elliot phrase is a good one, right? Where even if you're afraid, sometimes you have to just do it afraid.
Yeah.
So I feel like fear is kind of in the, you know, it's in a category of like like paralysis. It's not, as soon as the action happens, no one's afraid anymore. So the only way to combat fear is to actually go ahead and do it.
Just do it.
I think fear has to be confronted to be overcome. So I wish there was a way around it, but I think the only way is through it.
When was the last time you did something crazy and when you got home you were like, oh wow, I should have been probably a little bit more fearful?
Oh my gosh. I actually haven't done crazy things lately. Yeah, but there are a couple, like, I was going to tell you this about fear. This is really interesting because I think sometimes we perceive fear and it's a wrong perception.
Okay.
So I did a brothel chaplaincy ministry and started this brothel chaplaincy network across Australia, and I lived there for a few years and started this thing. And we went to this one brothel, and prostitution's legalized there, so brothels are legal. So it's just sort of, there's your friendly neighborhood brothel, kind of 7-Eleven, you know, whatever,
brothel.
Dry cleaner brothel. And anyway, we went to this one brothel that was like a really dark, horrible, it was a bondage brothel, so it was all like terrible things. And I remember when I first went in there, and when you come in, they take you into this like dark room and they shut the door and you're all by yourself in this brothel, like this little like booth. And then someone opens the other door and comes in, sort of like, what do you want?
Oh wow.
And I remember in that place going, I just stepped into a dark place. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Like where you're like, okay, this is some kind of dark, right?
Yeah.
And the girl said, what do you want? And I was like, well, I'm a chaplain, so I wondered if there's any women here that might want someone to talk to or someone to pray with, or if there's any way I can support you. And I remember this woman going, I'll be right back. And she like left and shut the door behind her. And now I'm like back in this.
Left in the dark room.
Now I'm back in this dark room. And that was kind of like a moment where I was like, ooh, I might not, like this might not be the best approach to this. I'm not really sure. But then she came back in and she goes, well, yeah, would you start with me? She said, I just had to clear it by the manager. And I was like, great. And so I prayed. So then I started praying with this girl in this dark, like bondage room. I mean, it was quite, and light came and hope came. And then she's like, come meet my friends. And then I go into the back. So this strikes up this relationship. So they're on our weekly route of visitation and we're less afraid, you know, than we've ever been before. And the manager calls me aside a couple weeks later and she says, look, when you come here, can you stop coming in the front? And I was like, why? She goes, I'd prefer you to come in the back. I said, why? She said, there's a back door. It'll get you right into the place you want to talk to the girls. I said, why? She said, well, you're scaring our customers. And I thought, that's so funny because your customers scare the heck out of me. Like, but I'm scaring the customers for real life. They're scared of a chaplain.
Wow.
And see, that's the thing about the kingdom. Like, I feel like we just don't, like, the devil's scared. Darkness is scared. Like, the customers are scared. The brothel's scared. See what I'm saying? It's not
you're preaching,
me.
Danielle. You're
it's
preaching.
not me that
You're
needs to
preaching.
be. And that, I don't think we get that enough. We don't see it enough, but we should. We really should.
I think that's really encouraging somebody that's listening to this and that's watching this right now.
Good.
I think they overestimate the power of fear and underestimate the power of faith. And when light breaks into the darkness, you're right, darkness should be afraid.
And if you believe if we actually believe what we say, we should practice it.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we? We should practice it.
That's amazing.
So like my buddy Robbie Dolby, I'll give you another story that comes to mind. Robbie Dolby, he's this crazy, he was like Mohawk, he came off the streets as a heroin addict, all this kind of stuff. And we were in this prayer meeting in this drug addicted like slum place called the downtown east side of Vancouver. This drug addicted city, 7,000 injecting drug users in 8 blocks.
Oh wow.
It's a containment, it's insane. I was just there last weekend. Anyway, we church planted incarnationally, so we moved into the neighborhood and we began to like make friends. So again, this is like no one even drives through that neighborhood. Like it's one of those fear-based that actually makes it stuck because everybody's afraid.
Everybody's afraid of it.
But once you like, you know, But anyway, so we're in this prayer meeting, and someone's saying to Rob, and he's newly saved, so he's really just believing God, which is great, isn't it? We should all just be around newly saved people and remind ourselves that the stuff is true.
Just no limits.
Right.
Just no limits.
And somebody prays for him and says, "You're the light of the world. You're the light of the world." Just like start saying this in this prayer meeting. And you know that a fine line between like prophetic, ministry and mental illness.
It's a thin
That's
line.
thin.
I know it well.
So Rob
I know
lives-
several people that dance on
Yeah,
that
so
line.
Rob lives right on that line already, let alone like after this kind of a comment. But anyway, so he's like, "I'm the light of the world." And I remember he just goes, "Ah," and he like runs out of this meeting place we were in, and he goes running down the street, and everyone's like, "Oh no, we've lost Rob. Like, where's Rob going?" So I go out and follow Rob because I'm the one that's kind of mentored Rob. So I go out and I follow Rob, and I see him. He's standing in this park in the center of this drug-addicted city, and the park is nicknamed Needle Park. It's like the darkest, like the cops don't even go in there. And he's standing in the middle of the park with his arms out like this, and he's just standing there, like with his head up to heaven like this. And so all of us are kind of like out in the back going like, "What's he doing? What's he doing?" Finally, like I go up and I go, "Rob, like, what are you doing?" And he goes, "I'm being the light of the world." And then he looks at me and he goes, "Can you feel the darkness trembling?" And it's so funny because I was like, I kind of could.
Oh, Danielle, you're preaching.
I could feel the
You're
darkness
preaching.
tremble. And tremble they should, because light belongs in the darkness. Come on.
Come on. That's so good.
Right.
Oh, I feel the darkness trembling right now.
Right?
I like it. We all should be like Rob. That is
Yes.
the best.
We all should be like Rob.
How good does it feel to see God's hand moving across the country, across the world, and to be reminded in such intimate ways of God's faithfulness? A lot of people, they really think that these are dark days, but I think you're right. I think these are
Yeah.
great opportunity days.
Yeah.
And the light is strong.
Yeah.
I just love to hear from your heart, what does it feel like to be in this season of your life doing what you get to be doing?
I have never been more excited
Yeah.
in my whole entire life about like the future. It's really bizarre, but I think it goes back to Pentecost weekend last year. I was in Salzburg, Austria, and at a Catholic youth event. So that's all random already.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we got some random things.
You got a lot of random.
Okay, so I'm in Salzburg at this 9,000 Catholic kids in this old, like vintage cathedral,
Yeah.
like the most majestic, like crazy, ancient Catholic cathedral. Pentecost weekend. Now, the day before I go to that event, I'm at the Foursquare Global Gathering, and I'm talking to the president of Foursquare. I'm saying, "What are you excited about? What do you see going on in the world?" He says, "Well," he tells me a few things about Foursquare, but then he says, "What I'm kind of excited about, like in a weird, like what's going to happen way, is tomorrow I'm on the way to the Vatican." And I say, "What? You're on the way where?" He says, "I'm going to the Vatican because the Pope has invited 40 Pentecostal denominational leaders to come to the Vatican on Pentecost to pray that God might do a move of his Holy Spirit on the earth like we've never seen before."
Wow.
So then that weekend, I know they're all praying at the Vatican. I'm at this Catholic youth event, and they say to me, "Danielle, just tell these 9,000 kids, like just tell them all about Jesus. Just tell them all about Jesus." So I'm just like, well, okay. Like, that's all I know anyway, right? So I tell them all about Jesus, and I'm like, I do like the best I can, explaining like salvation and what happened to me and what could happen to them and this invitation they have to encounter Jesus. So I'm like, who wants to say yes, with their life for Jesus? And they all, like 9,000 of them, like, yes, So then I think, oh no, I've done one of those like watered down pitches.
Everybody in.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I've become one of those people, So I'm like, sit back down. And I'm like, that's not, I don't mean just yes to Jesus. I mean like who will die, like who will suffer. Like I'm talking allowance money, like I'm talking like sponsor a kid. Like I'm just like I'm talking like your friends won't like you and you might get unfriended, like, or you might,
Oh, wow.
And who's in, and they all stand up again. Yes, yeah, they start chanting, yes, yes, yes. So I'm like, I'm out. I don't know what to do. Like, I'm paralyzed. This never happens to me. So then we say, okay, well, just like, who's saying this for the first time in their life? They've never made it, so 1,000 kids come for the first time to make commitments to Jesus. And they pile up at the front, and one of the priests comes and he says, actually, and he opens this like section of the church that's just where the communion sits and Jesus is, and that it's all like off limits.
The big part.
And he opens it up and he goes, all the new believers can come in here. And all these 1,000 kids pile around the altar, and these priests start praying for them. It's like, I've never felt like hope for God to do something that I could not conceive of or imagine possible. Then 5,000 of these kids pour out of this meeting after this happens, and they climb this like 40-minute like trip up this massive hill overlooking Europe, and they start praying. For an hour and a half they pray.
Wow.
They're praying that God will do something in the world. They're praying that God will save Europe. They're praying that God will save, and that one of the kids gets the mics and he starts praying for ISIS. And he says, God, we believe right now that what you did to change Saul into Paul, you can do with the most zealous ISIS leaders.
Unbelievable.
And I'm standing there so convicted because I was still thinking that God needed to drop a bomb on ISIS. I forgot that we serve a God who's in the business of the impossible. Like,
you're preaching, Danielle. Oh.
So I was like, oh yeah, like save them. Like it was like such a rebuke, but also such a possibility.
Yeah.
And it was just like wave after wave after wave of hopefulness began to like launch in me, and I realized that God was going to take the deadest church and the deadest part of the world and the most unlikely place, and through we're just living in a time, where you couldn't imagine this in church history, that the Pope would invite Pentecostals, not just Christians, Pentecostals to come and pray for him.
Yeah.
I mean, what's happening?
That's amazing.
What's happening?
That's amazing.
You can't make this stuff up.
God's happening.
God's
and
happening.
He's doing it through his church.
It's
so
the
cool.
time.
If you could join any musical ensemble of all times, which would it be?
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Ah, my girl. I liked you before. I'm
How can you say no to brass? I mean, brass.
Oh, my
that's
goodness.
such a. It's like everything, isn't it?
And you
It's
look like
everything.
you got some moves too. You look like you can
No,
dance
I
a little
can't
bit.
dance. It's so embarrassing.
But it looks
actually.
like you try. I
Yeah.
can tell. Like I can
Right.
see that trying.
Right.
That I can
I got
see
it on the
you.
inside. I'm dancing on the inside most of the time.
What is something that everyone else loves that you think is just overrated?
What is something that everybody else loves that you think is overrated? I think maybe like Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones, yeah. I get that.
I don't get it.
I never watched it, but I think it's overrated. There you go.
Okay.
How about that? What other profession would you consider if you weren't doing what you're doing now?
Oh my gosh, I was thinking about that the other day. You know, the one thing that I always wanted to do that I never did was be a bicycle courier.
A bicycle courier?
I just always wanted to do it and I never did it. And I feel like it's sort of this like undone thing that
You
I
missed
should.
your window? You can
Yeah.
go back. You can,
I'm thinking maybe.
I think if there's anything you could go back and do, I think you can pull that off.
Yeah, do you remember Quicksilver? It was like a big movie with Kevin Bacon,
Yeah,
and he was
yeah,
like
yeah,
this
yeah.
really cool like bicycle courier. And then I got the fever to be a bicycle courier, and I lived in a big city, and I was like, I could do that. And then
That's hilarious.
so there you go.
What is something you're bummed that you're still not good at, that you're still bad at?
That I'm still bad at,
Yeah.
like dancing.
There you go. There you go.
I should know how to dance by now. I've had like a lot of years to work
You
on
might
it.
not be as bad as you think, though.
Nah,
I
I'm
don't
pretty
know.
bad.
What is something you used to say that you don't say anymore? I
Like
think,
pre-salvation, a lot
yeah,
of.
whatever.
I
yeah,
don't.
I can
I
tell
don't
you
use
got
the F word much anymore.
What I love about that is you said I don't use it much anymore. I love that. I love that. What is what is something you pray a lot about, but you don't talk about?
Yeah, probably humility.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, or maybe pride. It depends on what side. Like
side
my
of it, yeah.
own, like
Yeah.
probably my own issues.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
my own journey.
Yeah, that makes
inward,
sense.
Inward journey.
Yeah. When was the last time you had to say I'm sorry?
Like yesterday, to my son.
Really?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
say I'm sorry. Like
Yeah.
I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
It's almost all I say.
What is something that is often misunderstood about you?
I think people have I think people think that I am still like frontline ministry because all the stories I tell are from frontline ministry. So I think that's often misunderstood.
Got it. What is an area in your leadership that you're still really growing in?
An area in my leadership that I'm still really growing in. I think definitely, I don't know how to put it, but probably like strategic planning.
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last one. Favorite cuss word?
Oh, I've got so many.
Come on.
Like in what language? Like in English?
Pick one and give it to me. It doesn't matter.
Well, I mean, like one of my favorite quotes is what I define as the sound of revelation is holy.
It's the sound of revelation?
Yeah. That's when you know someone's got it.
Oh.
Every time.
Well, let me tell you something. Holy you got it. Danielle Strickland. Wonderful to meet you. Thanks for talking to us. It was good.